I've gone portrait.
I've gone even more portrait.
What? You can't be more portrait than this.
I've gone double portrait.
What? Wait, no.
I've got portrait, landscape.
Are you actually serious?
I'm dead serious.
God damn. I was all excited because I've only got one portrait. This is all right.
You can always be more portrait.
I should show up to this podcast expecting to be one-upped, I suppose.
I'm sorry. I didn't mean to do this to you.
It's okay. But such is my dedication to this podcast that I have gone portrait on my main monitor in anticipation of this episode.
Wow. On the main monitor even?
Yeah.
That's a choice.
Yes. The screen, which was once 2560 by 1440, is now 1440 by 2560.
Wow. Why would you need a portrait screen for an episode, Brad?
We'll get into that. That's okay. The episode is. I don't think we can't talk about the topic of the episode in the cold open, or that renders the cold open the episode.
That's true. So
we have to talk about something else.
I came back from the desert and I was setting my stuff up, and I had my two monitors for my main computer side by side, like up and down, like vertical.
Mm-hmm.
And when I was putting it back together, I was like, what if I put the secondary monitor over on the left side, over there?
Yeah.
I think it was a mistake.
Everything is fluid. Everything is flexible.
It's the 21st century, man. Everything goes.
Yeah, fit those monitors together like a Tetris puzzle.
Yeah, the problem, honestly, the problem is I'm going from a 1080p landscape monitor, and the spot that I can hit to get the mouse to go over onto the little monitor from the 4K monitor in portrait.
Is that how it works?
It's itsy bitsy.
Oh no.
It's really annoying.
And there's no visual cue for where it is, right?
Nope. You just have to kind of keep hammering at it and sliding up and down until it goes across.
This is one of many reasons that I insist on using two of the exact same monitor.
Well, but that doesn't solve this problem if you do one portrait and one landscape.
Well, no, but I also would not live that life permanently like a madman.
What?
This monitor is going back to landscape the second this episode is over.
Oh, so I guess I shouldn't talk about my ultra wide that's in portrait.
No, we have to talk about something. This cult is too close to the episode. Hey, the Nintendo 64 just turned 25.
I think that's probably my favorite Nintendo console.
Okay, look, I want to express my revulsion, but it's not like that's an uncommon opinion. There are plenty of people who agree with you.
So I'm not saying it's the best, just to be clear.
I'm just not one of them.
Like I think if you're looking just purely for like the impact and the most games that were good, you got to talk about probably the SNES, and maybe you could make an end run argument for the Wii. I think in there, like the ratio of good to bad games on the Wii was really bad, but there were a lot of real bangers on the Wii, as far as I'm concerned.
For sure. I mean, there were bangers on the N64 for that matter.
Well, that's the thing is like the thing I love about the N64 is that everybody is figuring out 3D and everybody was figuring out analog controls, and it was happening simultaneously. And it was often really bad in really interesting, fun ways.
Yeah, it was like a transitional thing, right? Like it was a paradigm shift, if you will, was taking place. But like that's always messy, right? Like some incredible foundational innovative stuff came out of that, but it was also kind of a giant mess at the same time.
It turns out 2 sticks is the number of sticks you need.
Yeah. not one stick and 4 buttons in a 2-dimensional configuration that kind of tries to approximate the function of a stick. What were they thinking? Or
like 1 stick and 2 D-pads in different. Yeah, like look, mistakes were made.
Like the fact that those 4 buttons all have 1 letter assigned to them is pretty telling. The C buttons.
Oh, the yellow buttons were the C buttons. That's
the C buttons. You cannot have multiple buttons with the same letter. That's just the law.
It was the right D-pad in my head. But no, like Mario's, I remember, well, first off, it's the only SGI hardware I've ever personally owned.
That is the most tech pod thing perhaps that has ever been said. I never thought about it that way. I too owned a piece of SGI hardware. I mean, that was 1,000% in that era when I lusted after things like Next Workstations and SGI.
Oh yeah.
Boxes like the Octane, the O2, the IRIX, stuff like that. Like to the point that like when they came out and said, hey, we're working with Silicon Graphics Incorporated to make the graphics hardware, blah, blah, blah. And I got very excited about it, right? Because
I was take my money pleasing at a high level.
Like people, giant nerds like us knew about SGI from like Terminator 2 and Jurassic Park, right? Like film special effects and stuff.
Well, yeah. And this was 96. So I was not yet, like 2 years after this, I had a job that involved maintaining a couple of Erix boxes that were all SGI workstations. Man. It was not a fun, like, just to be clear, keeping those things running by that point was not trivial. It was a bad time for that hardware, but also it was still kind of the only stuff that was like, it was still kind of hard to get an OpenGL implementation, and in like in an experimental context, if you were doing compute stuff, if you had bought software packages that were written for SGI machines, you kind of had to keep using SGI machines because it's not like you could port that over or whatever to a Nextbox or whatever else might be. Anyway,
yeah.
But yeah, like I remember looking at that, and at that point I had played a lot of 3D games because like the 3DFX cards were available and we had them, I think, for a little while by then. So it's not like 3D was new, but I don't think GL Quake came out until that later that year.
Yeah, it was
or
around,
maybe earlier this year. I can't remember.
I think it was around the beginning of 97.
Yeah. So like it was like Mario 64 and Wave Race. I drove to a bazillion Walmarts to find an N64 when it launched in the US in December or November, whenever it was. And I got N64 and Wave Race. They were both phenomenally Super Mario 64 and Wave Race. They were both super expensive, but like Wave Race was unbelievable.
It was, yes, mind blowing. Those waves to this day, at least in my memory, because I haven't gone back to it, but in my mind, it was the best water physics ever.
Well, it was, but I don't think it was physics. I think it was just the waves were always the same.
We've pondered this question before. Were the waves in Wave Race just prescriptivist waves? Were they preset patterns that were just being undulated?
Yeah, because they were different. It was different wave patterns on different. Like that was the other cool thing is like the track would change. The track was the same, but the waves changed when the difficulty changed.
Are you telling me that the power of Silicon Graphics could not generate those waves in real time?
Look, it's not like it was. It's not like it was a Sea of Thieves situation here where they have perfect multiplayer sync across the wave system, which is also magic as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, man, that Sea of Thieves doesn't get enough credit for being a technical marvel. Anyway, we should probably start this episode. I just want to say happy 25th birthday to the best-selling Silicon Graphics workstation ever released.
Why do you hate the N64, Brad? That's what I want to know.
Let's start the show.
Welcome to Brad and Will Made a Tech Pod. I'm Will.
I'm Brad. Hello. Hi.
Hey, welcome to the show, notorious N64 hater Brad.
I don't hate the N64. It had a lot of issues, okay? Mario 64 and Zelda are Ocarina of Time, I should specify.
And Majora's Mask also a phenomenal entry into the series.
Look, I didn't click with Majora's Mask. I understand its wide-ranging influence, and it certainly has led to some games that I do like very much.
Yeah, I think of Majora's Mask as the first roguelite, really.
I mean, I was thinking of it as kind of one of the first time loop. I mean, it's probably not the first, but like, you know, when Outer Wilds got made and Deathloop and stuff like that, they had to all have played Majora's Mask at some point, right? Because it's just that.
One of the best Zeldas. It's like that and Wind Waker for me, really.
But Mario 64 and Ocarina of Time are two of the most influential pieces of game design in history, I believe.
I think Mario Kart 64 is also maybe my favorite. It's of those that's not like the current one, which is incredible.
Oh, well, I mean, I observe the Mario Kart rule.
The newest one is always the best one.
No, your first one is your favorite.
Oh, wow. Weird.
Yeah. Yes, which means the Super Nintendo Super Mario Kart is forever the superior Mario Kart.
So honestly, I think the low-key best thing about the N64 is that it had 4 ports on the front and you could just sit down with 4 people because people would come over to the house and bring their own controllers.
That was genuinely rad. Yes.
It was really rad.
Especially in an era where everybody else was selling you a pricey add-on to connect more than 2 controllers or even one looking at you NEC.
Yeah. Oof.
Anyway, video games, old video games. They're pretty cool.
Speaking of old things.
Yes.
This week, we've decided to do a little bit of a walk down memory lane in honor of the Windows 11, the imminent Windows 11 release.
Yeah. Well, in honor of multiple things. The Windows 11 release, your former editor-in-chiefness of Maximum PC.
Yeah. So
this is a little bit of a Will Smith, This Is Your Life episode.
Oh, God.
We've been talking about doing one of these for a while. I think we've thrown this out there before, like the idea of going and pulling an old PC magazine from the archives
Yeah.
And going through some of the stuff in there and just kind of chatting about it. And then we were like, hey, why don't we get one of Will's magazines that he presided over? And then we were like, hey, why don't we get one that covered one of the Windowses? So it's all coming together.
Yeah. So we the choice was between this one and the one where the Windows XP review was. And we ended up going with the Windows 7 one because I think that was like Windows 10 has been good. Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But I feel like Windows 7, maybe Windows 7 was the last great Windows.
Well, hey, look, we did 2 whole episodes on this. The topic has been settled. Not that I can call the list to mind right now.
Look,
I know
it was definitive.
Windows 7 definitely won that. I don't remember. I think Windows 10 was pretty close to the top.
Windows 10 seems fine.
You know what? Before we get into this magazine,
yeah,
the occasion of the Windows 11 release.
You mean Tuesday, October 5th, 2021?
Yes, 2 days hence. Number one has made me realize it's been so long that since we had a Windows release that I forgot about the kind of hubbub and frenzy around the Windows release day. Like it's been that long since we had one of those. What is it, like 6 years?
Let's see. Windows 8 came out just after I left Maximum PC, so that would have been like 2010 or 2011. Okay. I feel like Windows 10 came out as quickly after that as they possibly could get it out because it was received so poorly.
2015. So it's been over 6 years since a Windows release day. And like it makes me think back. I mean, they were not. Well, I mean, look, Windows release day was not what it was in 1995 by the time they stopped having them.
I don't think any of them were like that. Windows 95 release was the first real one and kind of the last big one.
Well, honestly. Well, I think 98 was pretty big.
No, not like 95. People lined up for 95, man.
Yeah, people lined up you can find videos of people midnight launching Windows 98. That's out there.
Look, people line up for anything now. It doesn't take, all you have to do is start a line outside a mall and like 3 hours later, there'll be 20 people behind you.
Just set up a tent and people will be like, oh man, something must be going on here. I better stick around.
Yeah. They got some PlayStation. You got them PlayStations?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, like by the time, like Windows 7, I just mail ordered. By the time like Windows 8 came out, they were basically just giving it away. Like but here we are again. Like it's been that long. And now it's like, oh yeah, right. A Windows Day. That's just kind of fun.
I was going to say, just to be clear, with Windows 8, if you clicked the wrong button, they'd install it on your computer whether you wanted it or not. Like
that's right.
You could fuck up and install Windows 8 on your computer. Right.
And wasn't it a situation where like the wording was very unclear about what it was actually going to do if you clicked it or something? Like didn't they have like a very misleading dialogue that you could like kind of fall backwards into Windows 8 from?
No, it said you were going to install Windows 8, but I think it would convert your key to a Windows 8 key, so then you couldn't go back to Windows 7 if you like, because remember, it used to be you had to pay for Windowses.
Mm-hmm.
Now in the Windows 7 to Windows 8 to Windows 10 transition, I know that there were multiple, like there were quite a few people, I assume, who had keys of questionable provenance, who were able to convert them into fully functional, legal Windows 10 keys.
Yes,
by using that key upgrade path that Microsoft had for a while. So anyway,
I'm still on my Windows 7 key, like the one that came with my legitimate bought from mail order copy of Windows 7, I believe, has carried all the way over to my current Windows 10 license.
That's what I'm using what is almost certainly a Windows 7 key. Yeah. So the thing that happened though, like it was funny going back to these old issues of Maximum PC, like Windows 2000 got a cover story, right?
Mm-hmm.
Windows 98 did not. Windows 95 was before the magazine. So like XP got a cover. Multiple covers, actually. Vista got a couple of covers.
Mm-hmm. Good and bad.
Windows 7, Windows 8. Windows 7 got a tips cover, but never a review cover. Like the review hit on this, like where there's a multi-page review feature is Windows 7 reviewed. Is it time to upgrade from XP? ?
Like, okay, so I don't speak magazine. Maybe you can help me out here.
Yeah.
But what the thing on the cover you just quoted, first of all, okay, let me stop myself. First of all, we need to tell people what issue this is in case they want to pull it up and look at it while we talk about it.
It's the November 2009 issue of Maximum PC. We'll post a link in the show notes to a PDF that you can download and look at wherever you may be and wherever you may, but don't do it while you're driving, please.
Yeah, so yeah, you're right. Actually, a lot of people do listen to podcasts while they can't be reading a periodical, don't they? Oops. Oh, well, onward.
It's fine.
So yeah, anyway, the thing on the cover that you're talking about, this Windows 7 reviewed kind of module, takes up, I would estimate, maybe like an eighth of the cover.
It's the secondary hit. The main cover for this issue is the 2010 Tech Preview, which was one of our stalwart newsstand bangers. That one.
Yes.
So,
this promises top secret chipsets, Intel's new CPUs, AMD's 6-head video card.
It had 6 DVI ports.
Okay. I assumed that was the meaning of head there, but I wasn't sure. Anyway.
Oh, sorry. 6 display ports. The thing is, you couldn't do that with DVI because the hardware required to drive the DVI ports, like the graphics cards didn't have enough of the hardware to drive the ports. So you had to do it. It was a display port only feature. Now, sense. Like every mid-range card comes with, I think, at least 4 ports. So anyway.
Anyway, yeah, like you said, by the time here we are at Windows 7 reviewed, it's just a tiny little blip on the cover of your magazine. Like Windows has gotten both better and less exciting over time.
Well, so the next issue was the big Windows 7, like here's how to install it, here's what to do with it, here's a bunch of tips for learning to make it the way you want, kind of feature, like Windows feature story. And that one was on the cover. That was when we built the big kite for and got the cherry picker and suspended the kite from the cherry picker.
But that's still
60 feet in the air.
That's still a tips feature, though, not a review. Okay.
Well, reviews, as somebody in the games press might say, reviews, it turns out, don't really drive traffic.
Depends.
Well, the point of all of this is like the Maximum PC cover design was designed to sell newsstand copies. So everybody thinks newsstand and they're like, oh yeah, you mean like the guy down there with the cigars and all the magazines, and then there's like the special rack on the top with the magazines that aren't for kids, and
he pulls the little metal gate down at night and closes up.
Yeah, exactly. But really, or maybe airport newsstand is the other one you might think of. But in the US, what newsstand means is the row of magazines at your grocery store.
Yeah, or Walmart.
Or maybe Walmart. But literally, like grocery store sales was like 70%.
Oh, like literally like the cash register, the rack by the cash register.
No. So rack by the cash register is like people.
That's exclusively for like gossip and culture.
Gossip and soap opera digest and stuff like that. Most U.S. grocery stores, see, you don't realize this because you don't ever go in the aisle, but like there's the row with the like greeting cards and maybe some balloons. And then there's usually mixers at the end. And there's also usually 20 or 30 feet of magazine newsstand.
Do you think, do they still have that to this day?
Because my grocery store does. Or last time I was there 2 years ago.
I was in, wow. God, I guess you're right. I was in Safeway yesterday and I don't remember seeing magazines, but maybe I just didn't go near the pharmacy.
So urban Safeways, urban grocery stores are the exception. If you're in a suburban place where there's a priority in terms of shelf space, and at least when I was working in magazines, the grocery store only paid for magazines that actually sold.
Okay.
So anything that wasn't sold at the end of the month, they'd tear the front cover off, send the front cover back, and the rest of them would get shredded. And they didn't pay for anything that was shredded. So like a really good sell-through rate on a newsstand, on a computer newsstand magazine at that point was like 40%.
Huh.
So meaning 40% of the issues that you put out in the world actually sold.
That's pretty wasteful.
At airports, like some different venues would sell better. Like airports sold a really high percentage, but it's a relatively low volume compared to like the number of like there's fewer airport newsstands than there are grocery stores in the United States. So grocery stores is what you were targeting. So anyway,
I guess you're saying there's such a premium on urban square footage that they're not going to waste space on a magazine rack of magazines that sell 20% of their copies.
It's much more likely that they will have a larger booze aisle than a larger magazine aisle.
I can attest there's a very large booze aisle that leads up to that pharmacy.
Yeah, there you go.
Okay.
So how-to stuff did really well in grocery stores because people wanted to know how to get viruses off of their computer and how to like organize their digital photos and stuff like that. Anyway.
Sure. All right. So should we crack into this magazine?
This is, like I said, November 2009, the 2010 tech preview.
Yeah.
This was one of the last issues I edited because shortly after this, I left to start tested.
Wait, so you were still beardless even when you left?
Wait,
Did you literally grow the beard in between leaving Max PC and going to Tested? Because I don't ever remember you being there without a beard.
I was never at Tested without a beard.
Okay.
I grew the beard over the probably holiday break at Maximum PC in December.
That would have been like a month or two after this because
probably 5 because we usually were like 3 months. This issue would have probably come out in like August.
Okay.
Would be my guess. August or early
stands
September.
In August?
Yeah, hit stands in August.
For November. Wow.
For a November cover.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, they were always at least 2 months and usually 3 months ahead, depending on what time of year it was.
Huh. Okay.
And remember, we also did 13 issues a year. So we did a November, a December, and then there would be like a January, December issue that was at the end of the year.
Sure.
That came out in like November.
Yeah. Well, regardless, here you are above this. Do you just call this an editorial?
Yeah, this is just the editorial.
The Ed word, according to this.
We almost hired an editor named Ed so that it would be an even funnier title for the.
Yeah, good stuff. Well, here you are without a beard. Declaring I am not, nor have I ever been, a fanboy.
It's true.
So, okay, there's a couple things here. First of all, you list out the genus and species of what you see as the common groups of fanboys.
This is a common editorial trope.
Uh-huh. So I thought maybe we could revisit. You could revisit your categorizations here. You're and tell me what you think about how they've aged.
Oh man. Okay.
But the other thing, before we get to that though, I just want to make sure I understand. So reading the first couple paragraphs of this, you're talking about backlash from fanboys to your Windows 7 review.
Yeah.
Just to be clear, you are talking about the same Windows 7 review that appears in this very same issue, right?
I am. It was a weird time. Okay. Because we would do things like actually publish timely content earlier online than it would appear in the magazine.
Right. So you basically spell that out in here. I just wanted to make sure I understood, because that is like kind of a strange, not common practice, or back then I guess it wasn't. But like, yeah, you were literally saying here, you'd already posted that magazine review of Windows 7 on the website and had time to receive a bunch of complaints from people before this issue went to print.
Well, so one of the challenges of running a tech magazine at this time, and also having the website, because at the time the website was growing at a spectacular rate. Like Norm, we had built a small team to work on the website. We had a bunch of freelancers writing for us. And it was a lot of the model that we brought over to Tested, like having a couple people on staff, managing a large team of freelancers who were generating a lot of good stories for us. The trick was we would often write stuff for one side and then put it on the other. So you like, if you packaged it a little bit differently on the web, then it would do really well. If you just put it up as a rip of a magazine article, it would be goofy and nobody would go for it. But yeah, so like the Windows review, basically, as soon as it was copy edited, went up on the website. And this editorial was usually near the last thing that came in, because we would leave, like there were certain sections that we would leave until the very last minutes just so they could be as timely as possible. Because, it was usually after you wrote the last of the copy, there's usually at least 2 or 3 more days of copy editing and production where you're making like the proofs that go to the printer and stuff like that. And then there'd be 2 weeks of a week of printing and 2 weeks of distribution. So the earliest you could possibly see, like the first issues that went off the line would go out to places usually about 2 weeks after we pressed send or would arrive at like, we'd get the first boxes, and then the first distributors would have the first boxes to the nearest grocery stores about 2 weeks after we published.
So in other words, plenty of time for what you described here as Windows XP fanboys to get in touch with you.
Well, so
before print.
The shocking thing about the Windows 7 review was not that there were Windows XP fanboys, because I knew that. Like, look, realistically, everybody at this time was a Windows XP fan, because Windows Vista was bad.
Well, sure.
Except.
Okay. I don't want to get ahead of you. I think I know where you're going with this.
Yeah. Except like the number one complaint we got about this review was from the people that were like, I can't believe you slagged Windows Vista.
Right. That's what I couldn't prepare myself for was the Windows Vista fanboy, is what you say here.
It's shocking.
Like, well, but yes, but okay. I'm starting to see a method here. The very first type of fanboy you identify is exactly the type of person who would stand for Windows Vista.
Yeah, look, looking back at this now with an extra 11 or 12 years of time between when it was written and now, like there's been multiple phases of this kind of like tech tribalism or brand tribalism getting real ugly and like legitimately bad instead of just kind of like annoying and funny.
Yeah.
So this feels really naive at this point.
Yeah, sure. I could see it. I don't, dude, like I'm I feel like I'm ready for some PlayStation 5 or Xbox Series X fanboy to like track somebody down and beat them up at some point. Like, I don't know if you see the sniping between console fanboys on Twitter these days is like getting a little bit disturbing.
I mean, look, the point of all of this. Okay, so part of my take at this period in my life was the best way to know you'd done something right was if everybody was complaining about you. Like if people were complaining that you were too easy on the product and that you were too hard on the product, you'd probably done a pretty good job.
I guess so. Yes, I can't disagree with you philosophically. I was never able to actually internalize that lesson though. Well, like to this day. Yeah. It's tough. Like, it's tough. Yes.
I mean, it was weird because like the magazine, the feedback when we were only working on the magazine before we did the website, the feedback cycle was so kind of separated from the actual process of making the magazine.
Yeah.
Cause like you wouldn't get people really complaining about stuff for like a month or month and a half after you finished the issue.
Right.
Like that, like it was easy to just say, yeah, okay, whatever.
Right. Like that issue is so far in the rear view at this point. It's like, whatever, fine.
Yeah. But when we went to the web, it was immediate and it was a little bit of an adjustment.
Yeah. Okay. So the first type here, the underdog.
Yeah.
The underdog throws his weight behind the long shot.
Mm-hmm.
As a self-described hopeless romantics, underdogs shift allegiances with nearly every product cycle.
That seems right.
It's pretty spot on. There are always those products that are like so hopelessly out of the running, but yet still have their incredibly devoted fans, right? Like
Chumby fans.
I'm sorry, what?
The Chumby fans are a strange group.
Chumby?
Chumby was, I think, Bunny Huang's post Xbox hacking startup. It was like a little digital console.
Okay.
That was like an ambient information display.
Sure.
Yeah.
Like somebody loved the Ouya to death.
Yeah. People love the shit out of the Ouya. Don't say anything bad about the Ouya. We don't want those people here, Brad.
I mean, so I almost want to suggest like a subcategory here.
Okay.
Like people that continue to support underdogs even after they have like been buried. Like the people that are still out there trying to get relatively modern games running on old 3DFX cards and stuff like that.
Yep. Those are historians, I think.
Sure. We'll get, okay.
Yeah, we'll get there.
I don't want to spend too much time on this one editorial, but
the funny thing about this is probably something I literally wrote like the night before it was due in about 45 minutes. And I was like, this is pretty funny. Like, this is a good way to kick off the issue.
I get it. Who is the investor?
The investor is somebody who researches a product greatly, before they spend their money. And then once they spend their money, they are devoutly committed to defending that product against all comers, new and old, for all eternity until they buy the next thing.
Yes. I see here, yes, that you say this person has invested both their money and their self-worth in the product.
Yeah, this is a little grim now that I'm reading this again.
Dude, that is absolutely the core, the backbone of fanboyism to me has always been people integrating their self-worth into their purchasing decisions.
Yeah, it's like, it's weird for me to be judgy about this though, because especially at this time, like I hardly spend any money on hardware ever. Like we would have like the lab, we had lab budget to buy stuff. And we would just, when stuff got retired or we didn't need the lab anymore, it would just, leak out to people's systems at home, which was fair because we did use them to test hardware. Like we were testing stuff all over the place. But like, I get it, but also buy what's good and then, just stop caring about what you bought after you bought it. It's fine.
Yeah. And if somebody else comes along and makes something better, then get that instead.
Or get that. Yeah. You have like, it's good because the next time there'll be something nicer than what you have already. Yeah.
Anyway. All right. Let's just whip through the last couple, three of these. Who is the contrarian? That's pretty self-explanatory.
Yeah. They just like stuff trolls. Because I don't.
They're trolls.
Yeah. Shit posters.
Yes. Okay. I'm just going to say this right now. I am not an antiquarian.
Brad, I got bad news for you, bud.
Dude, I am not.
Okay. Yeah. I think you're, look, I don't think you're a fanboy.
Okay.
B, I don't think, I think you are a careful purchaser.
Yeah. Yes. Trust me, I do mountains of hardware research before I buy anything.
I am aware.
I mean, I like knowing about stuff. I like researching, but more than anything though, especially when it comes to like PC stuff, I like for things to work. Like I like for everything I buy to actually work together and be compatible and like have a stable PC. And like doing a bunch of research up front has served me very well over the years in terms of PCs that last and are very stable.
Well, so the thing about the Antiquarian was at Maximum PC, we were a print magazine, so our audience skewed a little bit older.
Okay, now I see where this is going.
And we would get a lot of, man, this Windows 7 is overpriced crap. It just doesn't run on my 386 SX25, man. I like Windows was so much faster in the 3.1 days before they added all that taskbar nonsense. And to be honest, like I can do everything I need to do from the command line, dude, with DOS. It's all there.
I mean, their preference for the command line, I think, has been vindicated.
Okay, look,
in recent years, but
your proclivities aside, like this was these people. I was thinking about specific people on the Maximum PC forums when I was writing this article.
That's fair. Sure. I mean, the operative line here is antiquarians can frequently be found dumpster diving behind fries, looking for, quote, perfectly serviceable parts that are, quote, just 10 years old.
Yeah.
I don't seek out old things. It's just if I have something old that is still working fine, such as a pair of speakers. Anyway.
Yeah. You're a part antiquarian. The sneer quotes there, I apologize for.
Okay. And then the historian.
Yeah, this is everybody knows folks like this.
That's the retro enthusiast.
Yeah, Jeff Bakalar is in this category.
Okay, sure.
Right. You got
there's a whole cottage industry on YouTube now of historians.
If you got a record player and you got a like a Sony reference monitor with SCART cables, maybe you're an antiquarian. Maybe you're a historian.
Retro computing enthusiasts, let's say.
Yeah. And then I close this one. I often would write 2 outs to see if it was too smarmy. I was going through old Google Docs while we were preparing for this, and I found one that was like, hey, I think this outro might be too smarmy, so I'm going to give you another alternative just in case. I think I closed the tab, unfortunately, but yeah, it was weird writing.
I just had a really weird time compression dilation moment hearing you say that, because in my mind, I mean, we are sitting here looking at a PDF of a print magazine that we pull off of archive.org.
Yeah, that is correct.
So in my mind, this magazine is a bajillion years old. And yet here you are sitting here telling me you are going into like still extant Google Docs that you have from when you were working on this magazine. But like, does that make sense? Like in my mind, a print magazine is way older than Google Docs. And yet here you are.
Oh, yeah, no.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like this magazine might as well be from the mid 90s as far as my brain is concerned. So the idea that you were already using Google Docs to make this thing that we are looking at that is now very old is upsetting.
So here's the one that I found. I don't know when it was from. It was from, don't know when. Doesn't say, because Google Docs was weird back then. But it said, it was me talking about how hard it was to work at Maximum PC. This one's terrible. I apologize for this one too. And I was complaining about having to go out and buy new hardware, not for me, but for the readers, which is maybe the worst thing. This is maybe the worst thing I've ever written.
Boy.
And like, I talk about how there's this ultra thin, 1-inch thick Toshiba 3-pound laptop, which before the MacBook Air was a real novelty. And I had to send the review sample back. I was like, I'm going to have to go buy a new one of these because I can't go back to a 10-pound laptop after using this thing. And the ending that I was like, this is probably too smarmy is, so as I sit back on the couch watching my high-def streaming video and barely noticing the weight of this new laptop, don't feel sorry for me. Just know how much I care.
To be clear, that's the one you did not run.
I was afraid to go look, I'll be honest.
Okay. Well,
so
you seem to have survived, but
it was fine. I was an asshole.
I appreciate your willingness to prostrate yourself on the altar of podcast entertainment.
Look, I think this is no worse than when we dug through your Usenet history. So
yes, I suppose that's true. Okay. I'm sorry. I did not mean to spend like a tenth that long on that editorial, because we've got some actual content in the magazine here to talk about.
Yeah, this was a kind of interesting issue because it had the tech preview for 2010. I mean, do we want to do that first? Or we want to do Windows 7 first?
Yeah,
I guess
we could kind of go in order here. Like I looked through. I mean, like there's a news story here that's like the kind of the news out of SIGGRAPH.
Was that the OptiX thing?
Yes, OptiX. Yes, there was like an offline ray tracing renderer from NVIDIA.
So offline means it's not running at real time.
Yes, offline as in like it pre-renders all the stuff. Like the end of this article, don't expect to see ray traced games using this engine. Like I thought that was kind of ironic considering how fast NVIDIA got to ray traced games.
Well, it took 12 years.
Yeah, but that's like we've talked about it before. But like I knew people who knew what was going on with graphics 20 years ago who said like we will not see ray traced games in real time in our lifetimes. Well, like they were convinced of that. And and granted the current ray tracing takes a lot of shortcuts, but it is ray tracing.
Yeah, it's so this is pretty cool. I was surprised. Like I mean, the thing that this ends with that I think is true, and Jason Cross wrote this piece. Jason's a smart guy. He was at Extreme Tech at the time, I think. It's not hard to imagine consumer applications like games incorporating a few ray tracing effects in the not too distant future when we have GPUs with even greater general computation capabilities, along with programming standards like OpenCL and DirectX compute shaders, which were relatively new. CUDA, I don't think was there. Maybe CUDA was just starting. This was around the time too when we were starting to see support for GPU accelerated video encodes. Like prior to this point, all that stuff ran on the CPU for the most part, or you had to have a dedicated hardware encoder.
Right.
So yeah,
it was before we all realized that NVIDIA wants to cover every single function in your PC.
Exactly.
Not just graphics. Anyway, like a lot of these little news tidbits here are like, new lithium ion batteries and kind of DVD copy protection. They're like a lot of very antiquated news stuff that I don't know is super interesting here.
There was a lot of copy protection stuff then still. Yeah. This was before streaming was a thing. If you recall, like Netflix was still sending DVDs to everybody all the time.
Yes.
So a weird time. And there also weren't really any endpoints for video. Like there were no common platforms you could install like a Netflix app or something like that on. So there was no, like even if you could watch Netflix on your PC, which I think they maybe had rolled out by this point, there was no way to watch it on the TV unless you literally built a PC and plugged it in there into your TV.
I'm trying to think what the first thing I watched Netflix on was. Was it probably an Xbox 360?
Could have been the Wii. I feel like that one may have been even before the 360.
Okay. It must have been a game console. That's the only thing I can think of, unless
Roku had boxes out prior, but that was
did Apple TV exist?
Early. Apple TV existed. The white Apple TV didn't have a Netflix client, but the first Pucky one did, the one that doesn't run Apple TV OS.
Yeah. This whole magazine is a trip because it's like it's old enough to feel antiquated.
Yeah.
But new enough to feel like it wasn't that long ago. Like, does that make sense? Like, I know it just sounds like a basic contradiction, but like this feels both like recent and old at the same time.
Well, so like the CPU in the tech preview is the first post Nehalem chips from Intel,
right? Which we're talking about
Core i7,
right? We're talking about Core i7s for CPU. I guess that's really what it is. Is like we still use Netflix, we still have Core i7s. Like a lot of the foundational stuff in here. Twitter. You don't mention Twitter in here, but like Twitter, we were already on there at this point, right? And we still are. Like a lot of these brands and platforms and companies have lasted for kind of a long time at this point.
Well, and this was the beginning of what is still the current Intel architecture, where like Northbridge stuff is all brought into the CPU. So you have your number of PCI Express lanes is determined by the CPU you buy, and like the socket, it determines whether you have the enthusiast i9 part or the low middle range i7 part.
Yeah.
They kind of backed off of that stuff and then made it much more confusing, like a couple of generations down the line. But like this talks about PCI Express 3, which is still current on Intel and has just been supplanted on AMD. It talks about DirectX 11 being the next thing, and talking about tessellation, which every game you played last year uses tessellation.
Right. Yeah.
And like most Unreal Engine games on PC, unless they use ray tracing or something that's DX12 specific, are still probably shipping DX11 renderers. Like,
for sure. For sure.
Like that's just shocking. It's talking about the Xbox 360 GPU being tired, but this, like adding tessellation to DX11 was basically the last of the 360 GPU features that we didn't have on Windows in DirectX at that point, as I recall.
I mean, a lot of the stuff plateaued, right? Like, I mean, not that there isn't more to do in graphics, but like a a lot of the stuff hit a good enough point where like now we have a base of very workable technology that like we can add on to, but it doesn't need to change like from the ground up anymore.
It's feature complete.
Right.
Like the compute shaders became like the changes to shader models and stuff like that became incremental rather than kind of evolutionary.
Right. Like that's why we haven't seen a new DirectX in a very long time. Right.
Yeah, it is. And it probably won't until something major changes.
Right.
But we have been continuing to extend, like there's ray tracing extensions for DirectX that weren't even a sparkle in somebody's eye at this point.
Right. But there's no need to roll out a DirectX 13 or until recently I would have said a Windows 11, although here we are.
But there are places where there's big change. Like at this point, we're talking about like people building machines with 64 gig SSDs as the C drive.
Yes, that's one of the big things in this tech preview. I guess we're officially on this tech. Oh, sorry, I meant to be throwing out page numbers for all this stuff.
Oh,
the tech preview starts on page 23?
23. Okay, it was a spread, Brad. Give the picture its due, sir.
Sorry, that's a.
You took a lot of time to take that's my boom arm. There is my soldering iron.
Oh, wow.
Holding the dummy CPU.
That's cool, man. I bet taking pictures for magazines is fun.
Like, I'm going to go and tell you the best part about working on magazines was getting to figure out cool art ideas for opening spreads and stuff like that.
That sounds like a lot of fun.
Because like the shots for this thing, we would have spent a few hours. We would have spent a half a day at least on probably
for the whole magazine.
No, for this,
or for one picture, or for one set of pictures, one feature.
Yeah, this feature.
Okay. But yeah. So this is the tech preview on page 22. But yeah, like one of the big things in here is SSDs getting fat. Like SATA 3 is big in here. 6 gigabit per second SATA. Bigger, faster, solid, stadier drives. Like this is kind of when SSDs first happened, right?
So SSDs had been around for a little bit, but they were very, very small and they were really expensive.
Well, that's what I guess by happened, I mean went mainstream. Like got to the point where a lot of people were starting to buy them for their boot drive. Which to this day is one of maybe the best PC upgrade that's ever happened.
Oh, it's easily the best PC upgrade that's ever happened. And at this point, just to be clear, reviewed later in this issue is the Intel X25M 160 gigabyte MLC SSD. So it's there. At that point, Intel was a market leader. It was $440 for a 160 gigabyte SSD. Yeah,
that's a lot.
But like it was something you saw an immediate improvement on, and that was a big ass SSD for the time. Just to be clear, 64 gig was pretty standard if you were spending money on an SSD. We talked a little bit about hybrid drives, which had already kind of come and gone, and it was unclear that the SSDs at this point were going to connect directly to the PCI Express bus with NVMe.
Yes, there is no mention of that. I mean, like I said, SATA 3 is brand new in this thing.
We're talking about like serial attached SCSI and fiber channel and stuff like that to make them faster at this point still.
Speaking of AMD, you were talking about Intel stuff. There are new AMD cores in here based on Bulldozer, which is a name I sure as hell haven't heard in a long time.
Yeah.
I don't think people don't look back too fondly on that era of AMD, right?
Kind of a bad time for AMD, as I recall.
Yeah. Also, like 32 nanometer CPUs are seen as advanced here.
Yeah, like it's funny how much process tech improved over the last 10 years when we'd been hearing that we were up against the wall for a really long time.
Yeah.
Let's see, there's mentions of Larrabee in here.
Right.
Larrabee was Intel's x86 based GPU that was rumored for a long time, then kind of announced, then just disappeared.
Sorry, I have to read the line from the graphics page of this tech preview.
Okay.
Both AMD and NVIDIA are racing to get their new GPUs out because the 900-pound gorilla that is Intel is readying its own GPU, codenamed Larrabee.
Yep.
Was
unlikely
it really
to ship until Q1 or Q2 of 2010.
Yeah, it sure is. It sure was unlikely to ship.
Unlikely to ship, it turned out.
Was it really seen as like the GeForce and Radeon killer?
So Intel, the problem with Intel, I'd say problem, but I mean, it's also the good thing about Intel. The problem with Intel is when they came into markets, they usually just utterly dominated them. So like the assumption was that Intel wasn't going to enter into GPUs again unless they could come in and just absolutely stomp the shit out of everything that AMD and NVIDIA had. And because they were doing modified x86, there was this assumption that there was also going to like presumably could have accelerated. Anyway, They were a bunch of like little baby x86 cores running massively parallel in like 1,800 and 1,000 core widths was my understanding. But yeah, it ended up not being released ever.
Did not pan out. Yes. Well, we'll see how they do this time.
Yeah. Probably better, right?
The thing sounds pretty good. That's probably most of the big stuff in this tech preview. USB 3.0 is in here.
Yeah, USB 3.0 turned out to be important.
It's pretty good, honestly. Knew? I mean, like, standard USB caveats apply, but I would say 3.0 was one of the better USBs. DisplayPort
was rising at that point.
Yes. Well, you needed the bandwidth, right?
Yeah, man, it's still better than dual link DVI.
Yes, that's for sure.
And touchscreens. People were starting to sell touchscreens for upcoming computers.
Yes. Although this preview posits that touch interfaces are going to be a big deal, perhaps on the PC.
I think they are. I don't think you and I use them because we don't really use laptops all that much, but I don't know. I feel like the Surface has been a real thing.
Yes, you're right. I was not considering the Surface here. Like that is kind of its whole own ecosystem, right?
So the funny thing is this touch thing specifically mentions the Surface computer, but we're not talking about what you think of as a Surface computer. We're talking about that big thing that looked like a cocktail arcade machine.
God, that's right.
That had a rear projection display underneath. And you could put things on top of it and it would read like a QR code or something on the bottom.
That totally is the genesis of the Surface brand, isn't it?
That is where the Surface brand started.
I'd completely forgotten about that nonsense.
People were upset when they called the tablets Surface devices because they liked those giant. It's like I think the only place I ever saw one in real life, not at a trade show, was at a Marriott. Because like the Marriott kiosk things were all using that Surface OS. And they were like, you had to stand above them and look down. So they weren't accessible to people in wheelchairs. And then like a year later, big touchscreen TVs came out and all that stuff just disappeared. It was very stupid.
That's ridiculous. That's ridiculous. Surface seems to have found itself.
I feel like Surfaces are pretty good these days. People seem to like them.
Yeah.
Should we talk about Windows 7 redemption?
Yes, we should. Very.
We had a lot of weird Judeo-Christian language in Maximum PC at this time. I apologize.
Interesting.
Finally, Microsoft makes up for the sins of Vista
and releases a successor
worthy of Windows XP.
I really hadn't thought about it that way, but that is kind of, yes, now that you mention it,
look,
how this comes across.
Yeah, there's only so many ways you can make Microsoft sound a little bit evil, but maybe not all that bad. I don't know.
Were you still getting a lot of mileage out of making Microsoft sound evil at this time?
We had an explicit rule against putting dollar signs in place of S's in brand names. Because of Microsoft.
Well, I mean, come on. I mean, you've got to show some professionalism.
Yeah, no, I know. So yeah, it was a weird time. But it's funny because like looking at this review, I haven't looked at Windows 7 in a really long time now. And it's all like the current underpinnings for the OS are all Windows 7 stuff. Like the modern taskbar that's like half shortcuts, half what's running and is like the Windows version of OS X's dock is straight Windows 7. Like the Chrome around it's all different now, but it's there.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, I think that's why Windows 7 won our ranking. Yes, our ranking of Windows was that it became the basis for like good modern Windows, right? So yeah, that's kind of mostly what this review is about here, except that you complain a lot about activation.
Activation's a problem when you're an PC enthusiast user,
especially if you have a bench and you're moving installs between different motherboards constantly, right? Do they still enforce that? Do they still enforce license? I mean, do they still like hash like a hardware ID off of like a motherboard and
they do
stuff like that and tie your key to that? It sounds like they've gotten a lot looser about that stuff.
Like I haven't had to call somebody in a really long time.
Okay.
It used to be that if you did it too much with XP and Vista especially, and I think even Windows 7, I remember having to call regularly in the lab when we would change motherboards or CPUs out. We ended up just subscribing to TechNet, which gave us keys that didn't have to deal with that stuff. And then they canceled TechNet. So that was great.
Well, that did it back then. Yeah. This Windows 7 cheat sheet here, this matrix of different SKUs and features and prices is kind of eye-opening.
Yeah.
Yes, I started to say this can't be right, but I guess it was. Like, according to your chart here, the cheapest possible way to buy retail Windows 7, which was a home premium upgrade version, was $120. Really?
Well, so that we posted retail prices and not OEM prices.
No, of course.
So you could get the gray box OEM for $90 for a full version.
I am talking retail. I just could not remember it being that expensive. That's wild.
If you went to Best Buy and got the weird curved box that they sold Windows 7 in, it was $120 for the upgrade version.
That is harsh.
And the ultimate full version was $320.
That's obscene.
So
that is obscene for an operating system.
I was going to say the one thing. So this is it's also important to remember that Windows 7 is the first move to 64-bit that was real. Like there was a 64-bit version of Vista. There was a really janky 64-bit version of XP that realistically no one should have used.
Yeah, I think we covered that in the ranking, right? Like 7 was the first one where you could just install either version from the same media, right?
Yeah. With Windows Vista, you had to choose 64 or 32 when you were buying, and the 64-bit version was kind of poorly supported, as I recall.
I actually just dug into my Amazon order history.
Mm-hmm.
So I bought I don't think this is an upgrade. So I bought a Windows 7 Home Premium upgrade from Amazon for $50, which I think must have been like a very limited Amazon aggressive promotion kind of thing.
That was probably some sort of deal, yeah.
But then apparently, let's say July 11th, apparently I also spent $100 on a Windows 7 Professional upgrade.
So if you wanted to connect to the domain or get remote desktop, you needed Professional.
That might have been for work, now that I think about it. I might have bought that Professional upgrade for a work machine. Anyway, there's a little window in 2009. It was 50 and 100 for these upgrades.
That's pretty good. That's a good deal.
That's cheap by this, according to this chart.
The one thing that we said that I said here that I really like, because I wrote this, which is it's weird to be coming back and revisiting this.
Are you saying you don't like everything you wrote?
Look, I wrote when I was at Maximum PC. I wrote a lot every month.
No, trust me, I
all did. Yeah,
I mean, yes, thousands of words a week at GameSpot for sure.
The thing that we hit them on about the activation stuff is it's the same problem with DRM in general, which is that if you're a paying customer, you shouldn't have had to. Like, you shouldn't be harassed if you're a paying customer.
Yeah.
Because their process fails, right?
Yes.
And the nice thing is they actually changed over time. Like the Windows 10, like as you alluded, the Windows 10 reactivation process is much more gentle and less onerous for the user. And it doesn't involve calling a phone number and dialing in a 32-digit hash and then typing in a 64-digit hash back, to reactivate. So props to them. Just props to Microsoft.
I'm looking forward to putting that to the test because I have a Windows 10 license tied to a Core i7-860.
Oh yeah,
that I built in 2010.
Yeah,
like I just had 2 Windows licenses, and that one is still attached to that motherboard from 11 years ago. And like at some point I would like to put that on another modern PC, and I wonder how easy it'll be to move.
Should be able to just do it. Yeah. It should just work. I mean, the nice thing is that now it seems like the licenses are attached to your Microsoft ID, which is a weird.
Yes, that's how I know that I still have that license, because then it says what motherboard model it's attached to.
Yeah,
I see that in the account stuff. So,
the other thing that struck me about this Windows feature is that the wallpaper was so buck wild for Windows 7.
Is this weird man in a jumpsuit jumping with feathers?
Yeah, the feather jumpsuit claymation guy.
Is that the built-in wallpaper?
Default wallpaper.
Weird.
I always use default wallpaper for these. All of these ones on page 40, 50, and 51. Yeah. Like the creepy plastic heads, and the one that looks like Hohokam, and the turtle with the city on its back. Those were all built in.
Those are a little out there by Microsoft standards, especially this Microsoft.
I think they hired, I want to say they hired artists. I feel like there were conversations about this in the process where they were like, we've hired some really great artists to blah, blah, blah. And, it was, I don't know, it was weird. It was a weird time for Microsoft.
You gave Windows 7 a 9, which equates to kick-ass.
Well, kick-ass was our editorial, like our Editor's Choice Award.
Stamp of approval, the kick-ass stamp of approval.
Kick-ass. We had little Lucite blocks that we would send to people who won, that said you won a Maximum PC kick-ass and the 9, or that you were only eligible for a kick-ass award. So basically, Kick-Ass was like a 0.5 on top of the Verdict.
I see.
Like we didn't have a spreadsheet or anything like that. We just sat down and we were like, how does this compare to the other stuff in the category? And the Kick-Ass would make it basically like a 9.5, or 10 was always a Kick-Ass. So you could have a 9 that was no Kick-Ass.
I see. Could you help me understand your version of the pros and cons here?
You mean double hung and bay?
Double hung and for pro and bay for con?
Types of windows, Brad.
Okay.
Double hung are great because you can pull them down from the top or open them from the bottom, so they're really easy to clean.
Okay, I've never heard
bay
of them.
Windows. If you've ever cleaned a bay window and it's on the second floor, you need a real big ladder and a strong lack of sense of self-preservation.
Yes, they're a real pain.
Yeah.
A whole lot of bay windows in San Francisco.
Whole lot of bay windows.
All right. A couple more things here as we whip through the end of this issue of the very next page. Yeah. Maximum PC interview, Randy Pitchford.
Okay. I don't know if I can tell this story, but I'm going to. So here we go.
You just started.
I was at QuakeCon in 2009. The folks who make Borderlands, Gearbox, I had written a really favorable preview after they showed it at E3 the previous year when it didn't have the cell shaded stuff.
I remember that.
This is Diablo plus shooter. I'm in. This sounds great.
That was the first time, if I remember, when they showed it at that E3 before the cell shading came in. That was when they first showed off the gun that shoots guns.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. It's like I was like when they were doing that pitch, I was like, this game sounds awesome. I would like to go explore and get a bunch of guns. That sounds real weird.
It did look really generic at that time, though. Like it did not have much of an art style to it.
It looked thin, but the game looked anyway. So I was at QuakeCon. I bumped into the PR person for Gearbox at that time. They were like, hey, do you want to come over and play the game? We're doing some demos on Saturday. I was like, yeah, sure, I'll come over. And I was having such a good time. I played through the demo area like 3 times because they had a bunch of stations set up and it wasn't like I was holding space for anything. It was just press. And at the end of that, I was there with like 1 or 2 other people and they were like, hey, you want to go on the tour of the office? And I was like, yeah, sure. Blah, blah, blah. We walked around. And then the other 2 people broke off to talk about something else. And Randy and I were just sitting in the demo room playing Borderlands and hanging. I was like, hey, do you mind if I would do a quick interview? We could put it in the magazine if you want. And he looked around. There was nobody else in the room, no PR people or anything, which never happens. And we just started talking.
Yeah.
So
I mean, owner of the company, technically he can do whatever he wants, but I can back you up. It never happens that the PR person is not there to stop it.
As
the PR person is always there.
So Randy had some feelings about this is on page 58, I think, if you're following along with us.
Yeah.
You should just read the interview. It's interesting. Randy's not wrong. He caught a lot of grief for some stuff he said about Steam, as I recall.
Yes. As a guy in this industry, I don't trust Valve, he says here.
Yeah. And his point is he doesn't trust that the person who owns the platform for distributing PC games also is making PC games and competing with people on their store. He's not wrong. I get it. He argues in here that Steam should have been spun off from Valve. Yeah. And he says that they're exploiting a lot of small guys with their 30% take, which was just to be clear, exactly what Epic just sued Apple over.
Sure. But also Gearbox, Epic, not what I would describe as the little guys at this point.
Well, compared to Valve, Gearbox was a little guy, but
still.
Remember, before Borderlands came out, Gearbox wasn't like Gearbox had made critically reviewed games that did really well and games that were probably commercially pretty successful, but not like they hadn't had a blowout.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, they were not gigantic. I think Borderlands was that blowout, I think.
Borderlands was the thing that made them gigantic.
Yeah.
The other thing about this trip is I'm pretty sure this is the first time you and I ever hung out.
I think you're right. I don't exactly remember, but I think that's right.
I think that like one of the nights of QuakeCon, we went to a party. We ended up at the same, like, it was like a special person party or press party or something. I don't know. And we were there hanging out with a mutual friend introduced us. And I think that was like, it was before I had started talking to anybody about doing Tested at Whiskey.
Interesting.
Because that came later that year. This would have been like QuakeCon's in what, like July?
August? Usually August, I think.
Yeah. So I didn't start talking to Tatum and Dave and Shelby and all those folks until like November or December.
Interesting.
And so yeah, we were hanging out and I was like, oh man, I love Dry Bomb. You guys do awesome stuff.
It is entirely possible that happened. Also, Unless they had multiple sessions, like Saturday Borderlands sessions, like you're talking about.
Yeah,
I was at that same session. Like,
Well,
I absolutely also went to a like weekend Borderlands playtest for press at Gearbox. Like, you can go to Giant Bomb and search for, I think it's called the best office in the video game industry or something like that. A little video tour of Randy's office that I did on that tour.
What did you shoot that with? Just out of curiosity, because it was just you, right? You didn't have
yes,
like.
I was by myself. No. I was by myself on that QuakeCon trip. So like everything I did out of that trip was all me. I think. Oh man,
was it like this was before flip cameras? I think, wasn't it?
Yes, I want to say it was like some kind of Sony Handycam.
Oh man,
does that sound right?
Tape.
I'd like a DV tape or something. Maybe
probably tape. Yeah, right.
Like it's decent enough quality. I just went back and watched it right before this. Like it's decent enough quality. His mic is blown out to hell, which makes me crazy to listen to. At this point, but I am almost positive I shot that on like some kind of handy cam, and then I'm pretty sure I put it together in iMovie.
I probably recorded the interview on my phone. Yeah, I had to guess on like voice memo on my iPhone.
We were very grassroots catch can back then.
You were scrappy.
Yeah,
I mean that was the cool thing. Is
that was fun.
Scrappy.
Yes. Like going on that trip with GameSpot. Not that it was a bad thing, but like that would have been like multiple video producers hauling like nice camera gear around. Like. Certainly turned out a better quality of product, but it was a lot of overhead.
It turns out people who do a lot of work with people who do video stuff, like we were interviewing somebody once who had done a lot of press, and he was like, "You guys are so fast. How is that possible?" I was like, "We can't afford to be slow, man. Right. We got to keep moving."
Yes. Also, when you lower your quality threshold, you can move a little quicker. It turns out.
But yeah, I remember playing that game and just being like, "This is friggin' incredible." They only let us play. I feel like they let us play through the end of the first area in Borderlands.
I think that's right. Maybe. I think that's right. But yes, I do remember thinking like, oh, this seems pretty good. It seems they might be onto something here.
But yeah, we got to the end and they're like, you can play one of the other classes too if you want. And like half the people left. And I was like, I'll play another class. Yeah. I have nothing to do. Like it's either that or walk around QuakeCon enjoying the musk.
Yeah. So, yeah. Let's see.
Yeah, Borderlands.
Yeah. Do you want to skip ahead to can I just read what you wrote, the last bullet point in the stock?
Yeah, you can read that.
The shit on page 91 is hilarious.
Yeah, so like one of the things about making magazines is you always have these pages that are like you want to connect with the audience, and then you also want an easy page to fill at the end of the month when you're like out when everybody's out of gas. So we had this section called Lab Notes that was like what everybody's like a place for people to talk about stuff that like maybe wasn't worth doing a full review or, you know, kind of like the stuff that would have fallen through the cracks otherwise. Yeah. So this one was called What Would Gordon Do? This is a friend of the show, Gordon Long.
Yeah, we've had him on.
Yeah, he's been on. He says, I'm one of the last editors who hasn't pulled the trigger on building an i7 machine.
Do I take the path of the budget badass Core i5 on an LGA 1156?
Yes.
Or plan for the future with a more expensive Core i7 on an LGA 1366?
So the question is, do you want dual channel memory or tri-channel memory? And that's going to determine what CPU you buy, basically.
Like that alone was a trip because I forgot there was a time when Intel was selling multiple different socket types simultaneously.
Oh God, they've done that for almost the entire Core line.
Do they still do that?
It is not, like, it's different chipsets now.
Like it's not as prevalent these days. That's what I mean is like you're almost certainly going to buy the same socket no matter what chip you're getting at this point. Unless you're like going way out of spec with some like crazy Xeon or something like that, right?
Well, but for a long time the high end stuff didn't have integrated graphics on the CPU. So like it was Intel made something that should have been very simple, very complicated.
Yes, they've done a lot of that. They've done a lot of that as they have had like no competition, which is obviously coming to an end. Thank God.
Yeah. So we talked about like everybody just wrote a little blurb here, and like Norm wrote this bit about even though I now have my entire music collection backed up on a Windows home server, I still find myself hesitant to delete the original files from my PC. Color me paranoid, but I don't think you can ever have enough backup copies of your favorite trance and country tracks. I'm pretty sure I added the bit about the trance and country tracks there because it was too short.
That's amazing. But also Norm is a man after my own heart.
Yeah, but like, these were opportunities for us to drag our fellow editors,
or you to drag your employees, or
for us to plug the website and or the podcast. Like Alex Castle, who was our associate editor, wrote about building a MAME cabinet, which we built this awesome cocktail MAME cabinet that we ended up having to put in a locked office because it was interfering with the workflow at the shop. It was good times.
Yeah.
Good times.
Yeah. Also, I have to say, the end of Gordon's little thing here.
Yes.
As much as I hate the thought of ripping out a motherboard to upgrade to 6 cores, it's hard to say no to LGA 1156. At $285, the Core i7-860 is cheap, it's fast, and pretty tough to beat. That, like I just said, the following year I built an i7-860 machine. If I made the same choice that Gordon did, I feel pretty special.
You did well. Yeah.
If I did what Gordon would do, then I feel pretty good.
The one thing I love about this page is you can never go wrong by asking yourself, what would Gordon do?
That's kind of my feeling after having him on and hearing him talk about PC hardware. I feel like if I do what Gordon does, I'm probably okay. It's
funny because we used to have 3 letter sections in the magazine because we had the normal like letters to the editor. We had a, hey, yo, I need help. Doctor, ask the doctor kind of problem. Solve my problems column. And then we had a consumer advocacy column that Gordon wrote called The Watchdog. And I guess we must have killed the Watchdog by this point. I'd forgotten that because it took an incredible amount of time because it would involve like people sending letters into him and then he would have to call the companies that were trying to hose the people. And like sometimes it involved like we spawned multiple class action lawsuits from that.
Wow,
from that thing.
Really?
Yeah. Like it was if you ever need to know a class action lawsuit guy, call Gordon. He's good. He's got you.
Huh. If you ever need your $3.18 4 years after the suit is launched.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, the lawyer made a bunch of money, I'm sure.
I'm sure somebody did.
I also think it's funny that there's a Wolfenstein review in here, and I have no idea which Wolfenstein this is because the game is just called Wolfenstein.
That was exactly my reaction to seeing that column was, is this the Raven one?
No, that's Return to Castle Wolfenstein, isn't it?
Yes, but I think this is, this is that 2008, 2009 era Activision one.
It says it's a credit to Raven's effects artists that operating these overpowered guns.
Yes, that is the Raven one. Yes, that was kind of that was a weird one because they just called it Wolfenstein, but I don't think it was intended to be a reboot. I think it was like portrayed as being in the continuity of Wolfenstein, right?
Yeah, something like that. It
was a weird one. Yeah, I never played that one. Yeah.
Anyway, yeah. So if you like this, please let us know. Yeah. There's an infinite supply of old computer magazines. I hope we won't do this always for game magazines that I worked on. It's a little weird.
I find it very entertaining. I can see how you might not be a big fan.
I want to go back. There's a whole period of history before like I had any exposure to computer magazines that I'd like to dig into. Like I'd like to look at like 1994 Bytes and stuff like that.
Yeah, I would also like to look at some stuff from before I was into computing.
Yeah, I think that'd be really fun. But anyway, I hope you all enjoyed. Again, if you didn't download the issue already, we posted a link to the PDF on archive.org in the show notes. So you can grab it there. And I think it's also on books.google.com, but I'm not 100%. It's the November 2009 issue.
Yeah.
This has been a fun walk down memory lane, if occasionally slightly cringy. But
we all thank you for your self-flagellation.
Well, if we don't learn and grow, the other thing, hold on, there's a lot of unfortunate language in this magazine and I apologize.
Yeah.
We've all learned a lot since 2009, but sure. Jesus. Anyway, we've reached the part of the show where we thank our patrons.
Yeah.
Thanks, patrons.
Thank you. Thank you, patrons. Thank you. Thank you. So you remember, we have to say it 3 times.
Oh, thank you, patrons.
Yeah.
Of course, 3 times. If you would like to know how to join the 2,900 wonderful people who are supporting the 100% listener supported Tech Pod, you can go to patreon.com/techpod.
That's right. That's
patreon.com/techpod.
Oh, do you mean a patreon.com/techpod?
That is the URL that I was speaking of, and find out how to chuck in as little as $2 a month to help support the show.
Yeah.
At that $2 level, you get access to the TechPod Discord, which is, I think, maybe my favorite community on. Well, I can't say that because I'm part of a bunch of other communities, but it's a real good community full of great people.
It is a fine community that I am very fond of. The range of things you can go on there and talk to people about who are knowledgeable about the thing is functionally endless, I find. Just in the last 24 hours, we were talking about this somewhere, I think, maybe. Did we talk about this on the Patreon episode this week? That I wanted to make a little like Raspberry Pi powered DVR for over-the-air antenna TV.
Yes.
So I could DVR PBS stuff.
I was going to say,
that came up in there, and there were people on there who do that, and they gave me some tips about different software packages and like which USB antenna adapters have Linux drivers and stuff like that. Like there's somebody on there knows about everything.
Well, they talked about the HD Home Run too, which is like a standalone box that connects over the network.
I've got all these Pis lying around. I've already got this antenna adapter.
You're already halfway there.
I gotta use the stuff I have. I just have to.
I was gonna say you might be able to hook it into Plex with the Pi, and thing. There's probably a project that does that too.
I was thinking that very thing. I talked to people about customizing my PowerShell prompt yesterday. Started fiddling around with Powerline. I can tell you which Unicode codes correspond to which Powerline glyphs now.
Okay.
Like E0, B0 is that little pointy. You know what? I'll
triangle.
I'll leave it to the listener to discover. But you can make your prompt look pretty cool, and the people in the coding channel sure did know about that stuff.
Yeah, I just find it's really lovely getting like I actually pulled some people into beta test yesterday.
Yeah,
because we wanted to get a little bit broader audience to test the game that I'm working on, and we had 3 people jump in from the TechPod Discord, and it was great.
That's cool.
So yeah, there's it's good stuff happening in there. And you can join it by going again to patreon.com/techpod. As always, thank you to all of our patrons, but especially our executive producer tier patrons, including Paddle Creek Games, the makers of Fractured Veil, Andrew Slosky, The Bunny Fiend, Jacob Chappell, Joel Krauska, Twinkle Twinkie, David Allen, and James Kamek. Thank you all so much.
Yes, thank you, everyone.
I think that's as good a place as any to wrap it up this week.
Yeah, I'm going to go install Windows 7 in a VM.
I'm going to go install Windows 11 in a VM. Or maybe just on my SSD. Who knows?
Right, we got both ends of the spectrum covered then.
Yeah, the good, the bad, and the ugly. I don't know which ones are which. Have a lovely, lovely week, folks. We will see you all next Sunday. Bye now.